All right, let's talk about how to make a great BBRF or Building Better Region Fund grant application. So just wanted to start with a little bit of a backstory or background about this webinar and how it came about. I started with ID about 4 years ago after working in both federal and state government, Department of Industry and Small Business, before working in a urban economics and property company, consultancy firm. But since I started with ID, we've worked with numerous councils across Australia on projects really to help local economies thrive and grow. And today really is about sharing some of those insights and tips from that experience that we've learned over the journey to help you prepare a great grant application, which is due in a couple of weeks. So I'm sure you're all busily, pens down, and yeah, thanks for spending your time to come along to this today, but I think it should put you in good stead and help elevate your application as well by being able to demonstrate the impact of drought in your economy. So yeah, this webinar is largely about helping you. It's about helping you put that grant application together, and the focus of this is about demonstrating that impact of the drought, particularly with using economy.id to do that. So I'm going to share these slides like I mentioned earlier. I'm going to go through those before a Q&A session where you can ask any of the questions that you've got. I'll see if I can answer those. But we'll start with looking at the BBRF requirements. So round 4 was released a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure you're all busily preparing that with the applications due December 19. Round 4 of the Building Better Regions Fund is a bit different this time around in that it's actually asking for councils to meet this eligibility criteria, which asks you to show that you are in a place that's been drought affected, and then you've also got to show what the impact is of the drought in your location. So quite different to the previous rounds. And the purpose of this webinar is to really to show you how to do that using the tools that you've got available. But you've also got to answer the other criteria outlined in there. The ones that we're typically involved in helping councils prepare their grant applications are around criteria 1, which is around the economic need, also the economic benefit. But criteria 2 also around the social benefit of your project. And while I won't focus on that today, we do have a grant application guide that you can get access to that will help step you through how to answer those criteria. So the current drought that we're talking about started around 2017 with the worst effects really within New South Wales, southern Queensland and northern Victoria. And what we see from the latest data from ABARES, which is also a great source for information at more of a state and macro level. But what we're seeing is that the drought is already having a negative impact, and quite a significant impact on farm income and farm profit, as you can see in this slide here, and both the downturns in the red and the orange lines. But it's probably worth pointing out that the current drought in terms of its impact isn't as bad as it was back in 2007 and 2008 during the millennium drought. And so what we know from this drought and previous droughts that the main economic impact is focused on the agricultural sector, primarily through its impact on reducing livestock and crops. But of course, this impact on the agricultural sector then impacts on income levels, particularly farmer income levels, and then this impacting through to the supply chain on local businesses. So the reduction in agricultural output impacts on food processing, impacts on machinery manufacturing. It will then impact on sale yards, which is included under wholesales, but also impacts your exports. And in a lot of regional areas, exports is one of the major drivers of an economy, and it allows the economy to grow without the need of its population. So it's a really important source of economic growth. And then if there's less income in the region and less jobs as a result, what we see also is the impact on local consumption. So that then flowing into the local retail trade, the main streets, the services that rely they're on income. So we see this flow-on impact as a result of drought, broader than just the agricultural sector. But the other point, I guess, to make, and something that I think should be included in your grant application, is really around the social impacts as well. And so what we know from previous studies is that the drought has a pretty significant impact on physical health and mental health, and in particular physical health related to the elderly. So if you can show within your grant application the age profile of your work, particularly in the agricultural sector, you'll start to build your story, make it a much deeper one, and really elevate yours above other applicants. And I guess the other point to note about some of the data is that it's just starting to flow through as well. And in a lot of cases, the employment side is delayed in terms of its impact. So we see the output on production first, and then later on, after the seasonality impacts have kicked in, a decline in employment. So in some cases, the data might not be showing that yet, but we'll give you a few tips about how to deal with that sort of situation in the demonstration. So now for the demo, I guess the important question is, how do you show those impacts that we looked at a national or even a regional level? How do you show the impact of drought within your region? So what I'm going to do now is run a quick demo of economy.id, really giving you the steps and the way to build your own evidence base. So I'm using another example that's from Clarence Valley, but the structure should suit any of you looking to put in an application. And just wanted to also point out that we're currently uploading the latest 2019 economic and employment data from National Economics. So this should start to hit your websites tomorrow or early next week. I'm going to run off a local version, so it might not look exactly like what yours is looking at the moment, but make sure that you sign up to our newsletter or the product updates, which you can have I'll have some links at the end of this email, so that you're the first to know and start using that information to build your evidence base for BBRF. So what I'm going to do now is move into the live demo. And I guess what I'd like to start with is about, I guess, when I start, look at an economy, what I sort of want to do at the beginning to get a bit of a feel for the area. So for those that don't know, Clarence Valley is located in the northern areas of New South Wales. Okay. Let me just share the screen I'm looking at. That might help everyone. There we go. Okay, everyone can see that? Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. So this is the Clarence Valley Economy ID website. And so what I wanted to do was really just to show you through just setting up the story, setting the scene for this analysis. So what I want to do first is have a look at gross regional product. So this is the GDP version for Clarence Valley. And what we're seeing here when that loads is a bit of a feel for how the economy is performing today. And so what we see that it's the Clarence Valley economy is gradually increasing over time. If we have a look down the page, what we do notice though is that it has a very volatile pattern of growth. And this is pretty typical of regional areas, particularly those that do have a focus on agriculture and are exposed to external elements like drought, rainfall, and even the exchange rate. So this is something that's important as part of the application, is really building that story about this growth profile and how your project can support that. We can also have a look at local employment as well to build this story about how it's performing. But I guess one of the things that we see here though is that at a headline level, the drought isn't having a significant impact. But as you'll see soon, that you need to look at the industry level to understand and a bit more nuance about that macro story. So what I'll do now is have a look at, I think one of the first things you also want to do is talk about how important the agricultural sector is to your economy. So we can have a look at that in terms of a number of ways. Let's look at employment. And if we scroll down the page, we can see here that, so I'll just zoom in for you, that the agricultural sector is the sixth largest employing industry within the Clarence Valley economy. And what you'll also notice is it's significantly higher than the New South Wales average. So it certainly has a specialisation, and it's a strategic industry for economic growth and output and employment within the Clarence Valley economy. So if it's performing poorly, it's going to start impacting on the Clarence Valley economy. What we also know is that agriculture is an important exporter. So if we have a look up here, we can have a look at its exports. And so if we wanted to have a look at, again, it'll be the second largest exporter within the economy. So like I mentioned before, exports being a really important source of income to grow the economy without population limits. The other thing I think worth pointing out is the nature of agriculture in the region. So if you look under custom industries here, we can click the agricultural link, and that will give us a picture of the commodities within the Clarence Valley economy. And so we can see here, we'll look at the chart, that it's largely focused around livestock slaughterings and around other broad acre crops. You can break that down further as well if you have a look up in here. If you want to click on the table, you can see that it's largely around sugarcane. And one of the things that would be important to point out here is the share of sugarcane production Clarence Valley does as a share of the New South Wales economy. We can see it's something like 50%. So this becomes an even bigger story than Clarence. This becomes a state-based story as well. So if there's an impact on Clarence, there's an impact on the state. And this is something that can be also brought out within the regional, in the BBRF. The next step after we sort of build up the story around the performance of around the importance of agriculture in the region is to then go, well, how has it been performing recently? Are we seeing that impact we saw earlier at the national level? Are we seeing that play out in Clarence Valley? So what we can do here is, if we have a look at it, the industry focus page, and then we click on the time series industry sector analysis. This gives us a long range view of how employment or output has been performing. So what we want to do is bring up the agriculture sector and really focusing on that. In Clarence Valley, it's also around forestry, but we're just going to focus in on agriculture here. And what I want to do is have a look at output, similar to that story that we showed earlier in the slides at a more macro level. So once we've done that, we can have a picture year on year, all the way back to 2003, how the agricultural sector has been performing in terms of output. So we can see that, you know, throughout the 2000s, around the 200 million mark, up and down through that period, but then starting to ramp up around 2015, peaking in 2017, before falling sharply in 2018 and 19. So we're starting to see the impact of the drought, and this becomes a pretty important chart to be really demonstrating the impact in your region, given that the drought started around 2017. You can also show that in growth terms. And so while it's the Clarence Valley economy is sort of matched largely the New South Wales economy over the last few decades, in 2018 and 19, it's been more significantly impacted than other areas in New South Wales. So again, another important story to tell here in terms of the application is that Clarence Valley is feeling it potentially more than other areas. And so really highlighting that point that, you know, there's a really strong case to you to be eligible and successful in the grant application. The other part are in terms of performance. That sort of gives you a bit of a view and a long-term view, but let's have a look at the other elements beyond output. So to do that, where I'd suggest to go is the industry sector analysis page. So you can see agriculture at the top is already picked, but I want to change the comparison year because we don't want to know about all the, you know, between one point in time and now. We want to know, well, since the drought, what's the impact been? So let's choose the period of 2017. And what we get here is a really good picture, I guess, around each of the component parts of the agricultural sector in terms of how it's performed. So we see employment down. We see output, which we just showed before, down. The value added picture, so its importance in terms of contribution to gross regional product, is down. And like I mentioned before, the big important one around exports is also feeling the pressure of the drought. So you can start to show this quite nuanced picture here around that it's more than just output. This impacts on the export potential of the region. This impacts on employment. And of course, like we mentioned earlier, the flow-on impacts. And so that's the next part of this story that I'd like to show and demonstrate. And this is, I'll just bring that up. I've got another slide here. This is important both to show what the flow-on impacts to other industries as a result of a decline in agriculture, but also for those councils that they might not at the moment see the impact in recent performance in 2018 and 2019 about the impact on employment or output. The region might not be feeling the impacts yet, but what we know, I guess, is from ABARES and the Bureau of Meteorology is that the drought is looking to continue. And so you could use the impact model to run a what if scenario. So what if agriculture over the next year declined by 5, 10, 15%? What impact does that have on your economy? And so this is where the impact model comes in handy. So I just run a really quick demonstration here. What you can do is select agriculture from the impact model. Then we'll run sales. And in this case, we'll run an assumption around $20 million. So that's roughly around 10% within the Clarence Valley economy. It might be a little bit more. So we just click the submit button. You can put in your title here, which becomes really useful if you want to print out this report and attach it to your grant application. And it just gives you nice headings throughout the report. But what we see here is that the direct impact on agriculture is around 20 million. So that's what we inputted up the top. That then has a flow-on impact to the economy. So the goods and services sector, actually, let's run that as negative so that everything flows nicely. There we go, that makes a lot more sense. So a decline of $20 million has an industrial effect. And what we talk about there is it's the goods and services that are bought by the agricultural sector to do its business. It could be everything from fertilizer to machinery to fuel, electricity, and those sorts of things. But that's having around a $4.5 million impact on output. And then as a result of there being less income within the economy, as a result of the direct and indirect impacts, there's a consumption impact. So that's what we were talking about before in terms of people having less money to spend on retail, services, those sorts of things. So you start to see the impact beyond the agricultural sector as well, and its main supply chain linkages. So in total, we're talking around from a $20 million decline in agriculture, a total of $27 million across the LGA. In terms of GRP impact, that's around 12 million. So to do GRP impact, we're looking at the value added. And then the big number here, I guess, is there's 154 jobs lost across the economy as a result of this. So this is the full impact that we're starting to see, and you can start to use this information to really provide that what if analysis or that forecast over the next year of what could happen beyond right now and why you need this project immediately and need to be successful for funding. In terms of that supply chain links, if you slide down the page, we can have a look at the industry impacts as well. So you can see the impact of the decline on other sectors in the economy and not just the agricultural sector. So whether it be in manufacturing, here's that big retail trade impact that we're talking about, wholesale trade, everything from sale yards to wholesales of machinery being impact, transport sector. So it's really impacting across the economy. And this is a pretty important chart, again, to really highlight the flow-on impacts. That's the impact model. What I'll do now to start wrapping up the demonstration, but the other thing I've mentioned earlier was around the age profile. And so an elderly workforce, particularly elderly agricultural workforce, being more exposed to the social impacts of the drought. So we can do that by having a look at local workers and then having a look at their age structure. Get that to load. And what we want to do here is select the agricultural industry. And what we can show, here we go. So in Clarence Valley, the agricultural, forestry and fishing worker is significantly older compared to the New South Wales benchmark. And you can benchmark that to the region, you can benchmark that to Australia as well. But what it shows is that the drought impacts are likely to be even more severe, I guess, within Clarence Valley because of its much older workforce being exposed to some of those social impacts we've seen in the literature review around drought impacts across Australia. So this then helps to really sort of provide some further story and going a lot deeper than just providing the impact numbers about the social pain that some of the drought might cause in the area. So now I will flick back to the presentation just quickly to show you one more thing. Here we go. So what I've done there, if we can make it move, there we go, is this is sort of like the mud map, I guess, to what I just demonstrated. It shows you the different parts of the economy.id page that I went to. The other little trick is to run your own auto report. So if you go to the download part of the economy.id site, you can have an auto report, and you can pretty much run all the pages that I just went through from the industry report page. So if you select the agriculture industry at the top, you can then run, and I've just put in some selections there, which I think that are useful. So whether it be talking about the area and giving it some context, but then also showing the importance of agriculture to the Clarence Valley economy, but then showing those time series charts as well in that industry sector analysis page that we're talking about. One thing I didn't show was around the industry mapping. You could show where agricultural workers are and where the impacts spatially are felt. And also the age structure and income as well to provide a bit more depth to the story. So you can do that easily by going to your site and running off a report and then being able to report that straight from Word into your own grant application and make the changes that you need to do there. So that's about it in terms of the webinar, but I thought I'd just leave you with just a couple of 6 tips there around how to get yourself ready and put together a competitive grant application. So like we mentioned, the first thing to do, I think, is demonstrate the importance of agriculture. So if it's being impacted, what does that do on the local economy? The next point then is showing the recent performance of the agricultural sector, looking at output, looking at the employment story, but also looking at the export story about how is that performing over the last couple of years compared to the past, but also compared to the benchmark. Is your region feeling it more than others? The next tip is around demonstrating the flow-on impacts of that decline in the agricultural sector. If, say, farm output falls by 5%, or you've got anecdotal evidence that suggests that, yeah, while the impacts, you haven't seen them at the moment, we think that over the next year, the region will start to feel that. So we can run a what-if analysis and looking at the supply chain effects and the impacts on local retailing in your area. The other tip is going deeper in your analysis. So everyone is required to put in an economic impact assessment. Everyone's required to do a cost-benefit analysis if their project's over $1 million. Go that one step further and talk about the unique characteristics of your region, of your area. Is there an age profile story to talk about in the agricultural sector? Then tell it. There might be health issues in your area where you might have your own surveys, or there's the FIDU survey also looks at mental illness. You might be able to bring that information into this work and just give it a little bit more depth behind the big headline numbers that you're going to report. And related to that is telling the story behind the data, whether that's drawing upon case studies of previous drought events or previous external impacts, or even interviews and feedback and letters from locals that are doing it tough and weaving that into your analysis. And of course, showing how this presentation, this webinar was largely around the drought impacts and demonstrating that, but then looking at how your project will actually benefit your region. And so what we've got is the grant application guide, which some of you might have seen in the past. That provides you with a step-by-step guide to deal with those other criteria around the economic impact and showing the benefit to the economy. All right, so that concludes the presentation and the demo. Before we jump into the Q&A, I just thought I'd let you know about the stack of resources. Some of you might already be subscribed to, but the one that I point out is the newsletter. You can go to any of our id.com.au site, any of the pages there down the bottom. There's you just chuck in your login details. You can get access to all our latest content, blogs and product updates by signing up there. And importantly, you'll see when the new data that will hit your website very soon when it comes out, so you can be one of the first to know. So that's it. We'll now move into Q&A.